here back in another video. Today's video is a 312 subscriber special. Sorry this has been late, but I thought I would do this as a special on a Grimm theory. If you want me to do more Grimm videos, I will absolutely love Grimm. So my favourite TV show of all time. And it's definitely up there with like Dragon Ball Total Drama. And even started to watch Supernatural, but let's begin. So, this theory is, what if Trubel got shot instead of Sean Renard? So, I'm going to quickly go through the events, what originally happened, and how it would go from this point in universe to see how the events would unfold. So, what originally happened was Sean Renard got shot. I can't remember who shot him, but basically Sean got shot. Please let me know in the comments who shot him. I think it was an FBI agent, but he wasn't necessarily an important character, but he shot him. So basically, instead of Renard getting shot, I'm saying if Trubel got shot. So what I think would happen is Renard would take out the officer similar to how Trubel did. As Renard has been shown to be very capable of fighting, if not quicker than Trubel did. Next, Renard would call for an ambulance to help out Trubel, and Trubel would then go to the hospital. So Renard would then race to the wedding, and what would happen here is, what is interesting is I will explain what happens with the royals. So what happens here with Renard is Renard would give Nick the potion, and I feel like Adam's with the royals at this point, right? So I feel like Nick wouldn't question Renard, and the Western characters like Bud and that wouldn't panic, because the big reason why they panicked in the original was because Renard Trubel was a Grimm. They were freaking out, and Grimms and Westons in general tend not to get along, and that's not the case, but for the most part they tend to not get along. So I think on the whole Renard would actually be a lot safer off. So I think Nick would never lose his powers here. So the start of season 4, Trubel would be in the hospital. Now Renard's mother would not come into the series, because the reason was because she saved Sean. Now if Renard's not shot, Trubel is dead. Now the thing is, you could argue she may survive, but I beg to differ. And the reason why I'm saying she would be dead is because Renard was only saved because of the red snake. If it wasn't for that, he would have died, because we know he died briefly, but then got resurrected by his mother. So I don't think Trubel would have survived this encounter as a result. And yeah, she's a Grimm, but I think ultimately her dying here would have a drastic toll on Nick, because I think Nick would have been devastated that she was killed. So I think she would end up dying. The first 2 episodes wouldn't affect season 4. The only difference being Nick would not lose his powers. So Nick wouldn't have trouble with any Western problems. He would still be with Juliet. And keep in mind, he would still have conceived Kelly around this point as well. Because Renard gave him the potion that stopped him losing his powers. And I think here Renard's mother doesn't come back into the series, but I think Elizabeth wouldn't come back into the series, I don't think yet, so she wouldn't be into the show. So I think instead of a Juliet and Victor team up, I think it would be a Kenneth and Victor, Prince Kenneth team up. And although it would have taken Adeline a little longer, I think she would still have turned to the Grimm squad because of the child of Nick. And so Kelly would still have Diana at this point as well, so that's important. And thing is, Adeline isn't nearly as close to Nick at this point in the series. And the thing is with Kelly, I don't think Kelly Burkhardt would die because the thing is, Juliet knew Nick inside out, like they were dating, they were very close. So I don't think, even if, I don't think Adeline could pull off the same thing Juliet did. So Adeline may not be completely evil, as she originally was. She may have been a neutral ally to the Grimm squad, so I do think she would join Nick eventually, leaving the Royals, and would tell Nick about their child. And I think Renard would get Nick into his office again and explain that situation. And the thing is, we have to talk about Juliet here, because how would she react in this situation? She's not a Hexenbeast, so she never becomes Eve. She never becomes evil either, so she is actually quite stable. I think Juliet would be okay with Nick having a child. She'd have to be. I mean, she's having a kid with someone else, but I feel like Juliet would be okay. I think she would be annoyed if what happened, but I think Nick and Adeline having a kid, she would be okay with in this timeline, because in this timeline, she would never lose. She would never have become the Hexenbeast. So she would never become like Adeline. Because I think the big reason Juliet wanted to get revenge on Nick, Adeline, and Renard was because they were kind of the big three who got her into this world of the West and stuff. Rosalie and Monroe to an extent as well. Not really Hank and Wu, because they're just normal humans, but I think Nick would definitely. And yeah, so obviously the Josh drama was fine. And I think Prince Kenneth and Victor would team up. And I think Kelly would probably come back around this point. Kelly wouldn't come back yet, I don't think. Elizabeth will just put up here for now. I think what would happen is there wouldn't be no Jack the Ripper taking over Renard. Juliet would be okay with Nick obviously having a child with Adeline, because obviously she was annoyed that she was becoming like Adeline, so she wanted revenge against her, specifically more for Adeline, I think, than anyone, because she kind of ruined her life in her perspective. As a result of that, I felt that's probably why she went after Adeline the most. So I think here, there's that. Now, in terms of the actual arc for the Royals arc, we'll just call it, between the royal families, I think they wouldn't get Diana, because the reason they got Diana was because of Juliet. But because no Juliet, Diana is safe. So this means Diana would not return. So, in terms of the royals, I assume that Renard would still take out. Nick would still fight Kenneth. And would Kenneth have been killed in this scenario because there's no Sean Renard? I think Kenneth would still have been taken out, but I think he would have probably been covered up for a different crime. Victor, I don't think Sean's father would be taken out, though, because Meisner was the one to do that originally. I don't think anyone else would do that. As for Victor, I think him and Kenneth could be stopped pretty easily. Well, Kenneth's kind of the muscle, and Victor's just kind of more of a more on mind, like he's pretty smart. But we don't really see him in terms of actual fighting, so I'm assuming someone like Nick or Renard could stop him. So I think the end of season 4 would end right there and then. So basically, the end of season 4, Kelly doesn't die. I think Kelly would go back. Chavez wouldn't capture Trubel, so Nick wouldn't have gone on a rampage to try and stop her. So now the Royals are defeated. We can talk about season 5, and this is Black Law. Henrietta also wouldn't be killed, so because Henrietta wouldn't die because of Renard not becoming Jack the Ripper, she's still around as well. I think Chavez would still be killed because I don't think Trubel didn't affect Chavez dying. I think instead she would get Nick into her team, would try to convince him. But I think Nick's not interested, so I don't think she would be able to convince him because we've seen before that Nick isn't nearly as interested and only cares about Portland in his own city. He's not really worldwide interested. And I think Nick and Renard would be in a much closer relationship, I think, than the original. And Adel and Nick and Juliet are very tight. I think Adel and would be a very close with the Grimm squad, but I don't think her and Nick wouldn't be in a relationship because she's still with Juliet here. And I know it's not Luther. I'm just putting them basically. This is the Resistance, so I think they would want to put them in the Grimm squad. I think Elizabeth would be introduced around this point as well, because I think it would make the most sense. And I think Meisner would get characters like Henrietta and Elizabeth, who are very powerful hexen beasts, because in this timeline he wouldn't have Eve, so he would have to have someone else who's pretty strong. So I think he would get them. And I also think he would get Renard, because I think without Eve around and no trouble, Renard and Meisner would be teaming up a lot sooner. So I think Renard would actually know what's happening a lot sooner as well. Now, as for Diana, I think Diana would be with them. I think Renard would finally get to see her and Adel, and Nick obviously has Kelly, all that. I think the Royals, Kenneth would be defeated, but I don't think Kenneth would necessarily be killed. Kenneth is killed, so I think what would happen is the Royals would then join Blacklaw. I think the royal families would, Victor and Renard's father, joining Blacklaw would be crazy. I think them joining Blacklaw would be very crazy. And then Rachel trying to get Renard. She's flirting with him, trying to get him to betray the Grimm squad. I don't think Renard does betray the Grimm squad in this timeline. And let me explain why he does not betray them. So, because Diana is with the Resistance, I don't think there's any leverage for Renard to join Blacklaw, with the exception of maybe power. I think, first of all, Renard would think of his daughter's safety as well. Second of all, he would know it's too risky. And in this timeline, they're a lot more strong, even though the Resistance are a bit weaker with the likes of without Eve being present. They're still pretty capable with characters like Nick and Monroe, Rosalie, Wu, Kelly, Meisner are pretty powerful in their own right. I don't think Renard would accept, so I don't think he would become mayor in this timeline. However, if he did go for mayor, it would be for his own intuition. So I actually think someone like Victor would end up taking the role of Renard and end up trying to become mayor. This would annoy him because of his family, and I do think that's the case. Zuri would still try to seduce Hank. I think that will still play out the same. I don't think she dies though. I think she does survive. So I think they would still arrest her. Bonaparte would still be the main villain, but Adeline wouldn't join Blacklaw because Renard isn't on their side. And I think the Blacklaw arc, Bonaparte, he would be fighting. Diana's pretty tough, but she's still a kid as well, so Diana's pretty strong. I think Chavez would probably have been killed. I think we're gonna have to kill. They would never leave. Hank gets captured, which means Nick, Wu, and I think Renard would also go out to save him. And I think without Nick and Renard being there to take those shots needed, I think there's going to be some casualties. I think Diana would save Meisner from Bonaparte. I think it would be ironic if Bonaparte was killed by Diana, because I think it would be pretty cool actually if Diana killed her, or Elizabeth. Maybe Elizabeth does it. And Meisner still takes out Victor. Rachel would still be killed, and I think also Victor would die as well. And I think that's really it. The end of the series, that's season 6. So I think, would Kelly die in this Blacklaw saga? Possibly, but I'm just going to say she survives here. I'm going to say maybe they take out Kelly, maybe not. And then we have the finale. Alright, so Kelly would just replace Trubel. Adeline. So Meisner doesn't haunt Renard because Renard didn't shoot him, and Renard never betrays Blacklaw. Henrietta, Elizabeth, and Meisner are all alive, so this means Diana and Kelly are a lot more protected, I think. Bud wasn't originally here in around this point in the season either, but Nick obviously wouldn't have the same rivalry with Renard because Renard and him would be on much better terms. Juliet and Nick are also dating as well still, and Adeline would be close to Nick, but not nearly as close as she was in the original. She wouldn't reduce her Hex and Beast powers either, so she would still have her Hex and Beast powers, so she may be a neutral ally to the Grimm Squad, but she seemed past the point of her villainous ways. So, as a result, and also because in this timeline, this Renard would be a little bit different to the original because he would feel guilty that he kind of blames himself for Trubel dying. I think it would be pretty cool if Trubel came back and kind of haunted him or something like that, and Renard has to accept the fact that it wasn't his fault and there was nothing that you could have done. That would have been pretty interesting if Trubel came back near the end of the show. And I think for Nick, we would still lose. So who dies? I think the events would be very similar. I think Meisner, Henrietta, Elizabeth are taken out. And I think Kelly. I think it would be ironic. And I think it would be ironic, though, if Renard was taken out. And your man, without Trubel being there, would he revive anyone to show Nick? Probably not. Although I think it would be ironic if he revived Renard. And we had a 4th fight between Nick and Renard. We had a 3rd fight. Well, they fought once in season 2. The 2nd time they fought was in the office when Nick and Renard, when Nick went completely mad on him. And the 3rd time they fought was when Nick was pretending to be Renard. So I think it would be cool if they had a 4th fight and they were against each other. And Renard was the person who tried to reason with Nick about, hey, don't do this. Trubel wouldn't want this. Your family wouldn't want this. And, because Renard basically, throughout the entire series, was the person who tried to take the keys. He's the one who tried to do everything, stop everyone. So I think it would be ironic if... I forgot to mention that Meisner wouldn't be killed by Bonaparte here because there was a lot more people to protect as a result. So basically, I'm just going to say Meisner would still be killed. And I'm also thinking maybe Henrietta dies as well. Just so we have some casualties on the Grimm Squad. And that would be pretty shocking for the Grimm Squad as well. So basically, Bud, Renard would still want to protect Diana. And I think everyone would be taken out. And like I said before, it would be ironic if Nick and Renard were the ones to fight each other. And I think it would be pretty cool if he persuaded Nick, don't do this. And then, Renard and Nick fight. And then, Nick changes history. He defeats your man. And that's the complete timeline if Trubel got shot instead of Renard. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys so much for your suggestions and everything. for this video. I actually really like this one. If you want, I can continue doing Grimm theories. I actually really like this because it's interesting. It changes a lot of the timeline. So I will go through character interactions. Kelly would not have been killed, for starters. Elizabeth may not be as dominant as a character, but she would still be introduced, I think, later. Adeline may not be completely evil, but she may have been a neutral ally to the Grimm squad, but she's seen past the point of her villainous ways. Juliet would never have been killed and never become Eve. For Wu, he would still have his lycanthropy. Not a lot changed for him in either Monroe, Rosalie, and Hank. For Renard, the only interaction for him is he would have been less evil, who would never join Blacklaw, neither would Adeline, and he may have actually been more stable and a neutral ally to. He may have been a more powerful ally to Nick and Closer. Evidence suggests that Renard may have still shot Meissner to put him out of misery if he couldn't stop Bonaparte. Henriette would probably have been killed in the crossfire because I imagine that would be quite kind of ironic and pretty shocking. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know any suggestions in the comments. Any video, and I'll do it. Even if it takes me a while to do, I will eventually get around to it. And yeah, peace, farewell.